Hello and welcome to GM Tips, the show where my friends and I share with you our thoughts and suggestions on how to game master your role-playing game. I'm your host, Satine Phoenix, co-creator of Maze Arcana and a dungeon master for D&D. First, thank you so much for joining me and my guests on this GM Tips journey. It's awesome hearing your thoughts on our suggestions. Another big thank you to all the pro GMs for continuing the conversation in the comments section. We are an amazing community built on people wanting to play together, so yeah, let's play. Now that you're all fabulous game masters, you're ready to take it a step further, yeah? Right? Yeah, you are. Today's topic is multiple story tropes. If you're like me, you tend to run games for more than one group in different stories. Why not run 2 or more groups through the same story? We love it when characters affect the world, and what better way to show this than to have another group of adventurers come across the first group's mess? Rudy and I run 2 D&D shows. On Fury's Reach, 2 groups in the same location go after the same artifact but have no idea about the other, at first. Through the season, we've had their paths crisscross, and over time the parties pick up little things that the other left behind, or experience the effect the party had to NPCs and the environment. In Rudy's show, Ivan plays Johann Wilder, a writer-bard who comes to Chult to do a signing for his new book and find his sister. In my show, Kurt plays a swashbuckling bard who dreams of writing his adventures just like the great Johann Wilder. Rudy and I let the players act out their characters and make sure to feed the effects of their actions back into the story. For instance, Vartak comes across a chest of books that were left behind by Johann. We didn't place the books there, Ivan did, but knowing my party was going to be traveling that way, we made sure they found it. Vartak performed at an inn in Port Nyanzaru, and Johann hears about the tales of this glorious bard a couple episodes later. In one of the last episodes, Johann picks up a book in the jungle that has some of Vartak's writing and reads it aloud to his group. Don't worry, I won't leak any more spoilers. How do we do it? We set up a writer's room and together came up with the overarching story. We decided on the major story beats and placed them in certain episodes based on in-game travel time and wanderlust allotment, putting the characters where they need to be and let them decide how to get to the next beat. The urgency of finding the artifact before someone else does helps move the characters along so the GM doesn't have to. It may feel a little railroady, but the freedom comes in focusing the players on the environment around them with NPCs and combat. The encounters they're confronted with are challenging. The death curse makes the groups incredibly afraid of dying and not coming back, so the stakes are high, which is satisfying. Sure, there's an end game. It's only 12 episodes, but it's in the anticipation of what comes next that people enjoy a stricter story. Give them enough to do within the adventure and they won't realize that you're setting them up. For home games, you can draw this out, guiding one group more than the other based on where your story goes. Have your players pit against each other, or 2 squads of the same faction working together. The possibilities of way to blend stories are as big as your imagination. I could roll on, but instead, let's discuss this with the author of The 7th Age and writer for Geek and Sundry, Rick Hines. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You and I work together a lot on the articles.
Yes.
Actually, you write them and you just ask me questions.
Yes. Somebody's got to ask you what your house rules are after all. I mean, nobody else does. So.
That's true.
But all the other articles that talk more about all these GM tips. So.
Yes. So let's give them some GM tips from the both of us.
GM Mind Meld.
Oh, GM Mind Meld. Yes, I like it. So you play a lot of different role-playing games, the opposite of me. But I know that you've been LARPing.
It's a secret. Not really. I have 7 trench coats and way more katanas and fake swords and a few sets of sunglasses. So the 90s were very kind to me.
Awesome. So how long have you been LARPing? You said 90s.
Yes. Yeah, I'm a child of the 80s, so about 17, 18 years I've been LARPing now. So I think I started when I was 17 in high school. So.
Welcome to the club. So, you've been LARPing, and there are a lot of skills as a LARPer. Is there a game master equivalent to LARPing?
Storyteller.
Storytelling. As a storyteller, what are skills that you have as a storyteller that you use in tabletop games?
So the biggest thing that we do is in LARP, you have all these different characters that all have their own unique backgrounds and all their special stories, and everybody's their own special snowflake, or they want to play the rare clans or the rare things in tabletop. The biggest thing we do is rather than look at the group is just one solid body, it's actually 5 separate characters or 6 separate characters, each with their own individual plot lines and storylines. So this way, I run a lot of prequels in my tabletop games. I take the time to craft like elaborate conspiracy backstories and like Shadowrun games to, make it so that the party sits down and they're a party, but there's a little bit of tension between the party because they're all there for different goals. So that's probably the biggest thing I poured over from LARP.
Well, I know because of our pre-interview that you're actually doing something similar to Rudy and myself, except for you're doing it by yourself with different tables.
Yeah. So the first 5th edition D&D game that I've run in like ever, or actually ever, is I have 2 separate groups, both going to these different like militarized Hogwarts, like academies in Faerun, and they're from different schools and they're being trained to become adventurers. So you go to school, you're like a level 1 barbarian, and you have like a barbarian teacher who teaches you how to like hit things with an axe and stuff. But the characters are going to go out into the world and they're going to do things, but they're going to encounter different plot lines, and the storyline trees are going to move up behind the characters. So the characters all have their individual stories, and then they have their school stories, but they're still in the same sandbox of the world. So the players can choose, I'm going to go over here, I'm going to go over here to this school, I'm going to do this thing, but their plot lines are going to intertwine without me as a GM going nuts. And I did this by like having this matrix that I set up.
Okay, so you've got, all right, so one table, 5 different plot lines.
Yes.
Because of all the individual characters. That's already complicated.
Yep.
So you have that, and then you have to figure out how to fuse all of them together to become a unit? Or are you just kind of letting them go all over the place?
So it's actually, it sounds complicated, but it's super easy when you break it down. What you do is you take a matrix of 5, 5 boxes down the line, and you say like, okay, you have the Harpers, you have the Zentarum, you have all the different D&D factions, and they're all villains in this case. And what happens is these villains, like the Zentarum, are going to do this thing at this time, this thing at this tier, this thing at this tier. And the player has their matrix that kind of overlays that matrix. So at any game session I sit down, all I have to do is take like my campaign story and overlay the player matrix on top of it. So this way the players have full player agency and they can do all of the epic stuff that they want to do in all their side quests, but no matter what they're doing, I know what's happening in the world around them at that time.
So you've got that, and then you have the characters on top, but then every once in a while their characters will go off and onto their other side stories.
Yes.
But you still are kind of wrangling. How do you not railroad that?
How do I not railroad it? Because by establishing that sandbox from the start of saying like, hey, here's the 5 schools you can play, here's the 5 factions that you can play, having those trees that they can walk on. If the player hops from this ladder to that ladder and goes on a different side quest or a different track, then it's going to work great. I don't have to railroad anything, because even if they completely ignore this plot line, like if they're going to go into a haunted house and they decide, you know what, we don't want to do that, we're not going to go into it, and then decide to go open up like an inn and start like becoming like tax accountants or something, it doesn't matter. I know what's going to happen in the world, because all I'm going to do is like a little chess piece. I'm just going to move my die up on the counter, like we're playing Arkham Horror or some other like game with like a doomsday clock. The plot's still going to advance. If the players choose to take part in that, that is player choice.
Okay, cool.
And I will still run whatever story the players are doing, but the world is going to evolve around them. And sometimes the other group might force the first group's hand.
So you've got all the factions, you have the world doing its own thing, and everybody's kind of doing their whatever, and then you have that first overlay, which is already complicated. And then you have the other stories. So it's hard to overlap them. Are you getting them to just move back and forth? Like this group does one thing, and then another group kind of wait till that one goes away? Or?
No. So the base campaign plot is like 5 trees with like the Zentarum and all the factions like trying to, in this case, that they're trying to kill the gods.
Yeah.
And so that plot is the same world plot for both groups. And then both groups have their character plot lines that are kind of written within that box. And
But you keep them separate, though.
I do. I keep them separate.
Because they can't physically overlap.
Right. And just what you might hear, though, is since the world is big enough, you might hear that this group went and like killed like a church of Mask or something like that. And then maybe this group has a thief that's actually worships Mask. And he'll hear a rumor, oh, the thief of Mask was attacked by the school of like Alexandria or something. And so then they'll get, let's go investigate that thing, and they'll find the ramifications of what the first party did. And so conflict in PvP can slowly start brewing as they intertwine. The nice thing is this sounds really complicated, but as long as you set up your matrix, once game starts, all you have to do is sit on down every day at the table and be like, what do you guys want to do?
Oh, cool.
Because once you have like that once you take the time to invest in your players' agency and what your players have come up with, they almost write the world that they're doing within this sandbox. And the only key that you have to do as a GM is make sure that, okay, guys, here's the sandbox.
Yeah.
You do have to have that kind of like artificial illusion, but at the same time, I'm kind of that person that if the players want to get on a boat and sail to a different continent, well, okay, I guess the gods over here are just going to keep dying, because nobody's there to stop them.
Exactly.
So you guys are going to be over here in like the Far East just hearing about these stories that are happening.
Yeah. Can I tell you what we did? We actually put both sets of characters in the same location, but we had them in different parts of the location. So like my group came up and overlooked stuff, and I was like, what do we do next? So I paused right there, and then his group shows up and then does their thing on this lower level, and then they leave, and then the next week I basically narrated what happened so they got to see it, and then they went down to try to get the item that the other group took, but then got there too late because it took them some time to get down, and it was actually really cool to get them that close and actually witnessing each other, but then again not interacting.
The only way I could do that as one person is either I'd have to get the co-op GM thing going, or my plan is like maybe like once every 6 months, I'm just gonna have a massive party at my house with like booze and things like that, and we're all just gonna play, and it's gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna run this side scene with you. Everybody else just like go eat food or something, or like watch, but I do hope to see that interaction when those characters finally meet for the first time, and I wonder if there'll be PvP.
So let's talk about PvP, because I don't encourage that in my games, but you're explaining that it happens. So.
It happens anytime you have people with different motives and different goals. There's a chance that even though you're kind of loosely on the same side, over time as characters develop, they may grow to hate each other because they become more convicted in their things. And one of the best ways to succeed in my games is always just have conviction in your character. And that conviction can sometimes lead you astray with another player. And so sometimes, and every game master has run into this, two players want to kill each other. And sometimes it happens intentionally, and sometimes it happens accidentally. And you sometimes have to diffuse some tensions, and you got to stop people from being like, taking like the out of game, like, bit. You got to keep it to the table and the story of the characters. But I have a good group, and we've learned over the years how to do table PvP in a fun way. And that mostly comes down to you make it a story, right?
Yeah.
It's a thing. Like, you're not just a character on an island alone. You have a faction and people behind you. And if you're opposed to this person, sometimes even PvP isn't necessarily killing each other. It could be thwarting your ideas. It could be getting you in detention in school. There's a lot of different ways that PvP can manifest. But it is important, if you're going to have 5 different characters with 5 different storylines at your table, you have to be prepared that it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Don't sugarcoat yourself to think that it's not going to happen. It will. So
we should go into depth on that in the article for this episode.
Awesome.
Okay. I'm going to ask you 3 questions.
Oh, shit.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. What does your pregame house rule look like?
So my pregame house rule actually is, it's 2, I'm sorry. The first is that somebody must recap the last session. So I let a player, narrate what happened in the last game session. And the second one is if you kill anybody in the game, incidentally or intentionally, you have to buy the drinks.
Nice.
This also applies to me as a GM. So if I kill a player, unfortunately, I have to bring like a bottle of wine or something next game session.
I'm sorry.
You're done.
Okay, number 2, favorite GM moment.
My favorite GM moment comes from a LARP that I ran. And this happened where we had this player who was playing a Boggin and Changeling. And nobody wanted to play Changelings at all. And so Michelle, she went about this court game where everybody wanted to play these power-hungry people and with these superpowers and strength and whatnot. And she was this little courtier. And at one point, there was a whole faction of players that were her enemy faction. And she convinced one of the players, this guy named James, to come swear an oath by holding a sword in the middle of a LARP down on their knees and swear an oath of Long Road where their characters are going to be tied together forever. Their goals are aligned. And in the middle of the court, the room is dark, everything's quiet, and they're sitting there and they're both holding the sword and they're swearing this oath to each other. And I'm sitting there as a GM watching this, knowing that Michelle has just tricked one of the biggest factions to now serving her. And in the distance, in the background, you could see all of the players of the faction that they're just like, no, do not swear this oath. And the reason it's my favorite GM moment is after that day, players wanted to play Boggins in the game.
Nice.
People wanted to play these cunning courtiers, and everybody was afraid of, what the Appalachian courts and these people could do.
Cool. Quick tip to the audience.
Quick tip to the audience. Player agency. If your players are going to, in a cyberpunk game, for example, decide to start selling off vehicles and start taking over corporations and playing tax accountants, let them do it. Do not be afraid of what your players want to do or what businesses they want to set up or how they want to take on the adventure. If it's a long-running tabletop game, write the game appropriate to your players.
Nice. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for coming here from Chicago.
Thank you.
Please tell us where we can find you on the internet.
So the Seventh Age Dawn is available everywhere. I am at Crankybolt on any platform, whether it be gaming, League of Legends, Twitter, Facebook, no matter what it is, it's Crankybolt.
Cranky Bolt. As always, I'm Satine Phoenix at Satine Phoenix. You can ask me GM questions at #AskSatine. Pick up and play one of my Guild Adept supplements for the Tomb of Annihilation at dmsguild.com. Catch me live every Sunday at noon on Maze Arcana's Orphan Echo on twitch.tv/MazeArcana and every Tuesday night Dungeon Mastering on twitch.tv/DND. Thank you so much for watching us here on Geek and Sundry. See you next time. Rick, are you ready?
I think so.
Okay, please. Jam us out of here.
You're on a ledge. You look down 21 floors up. The eclipse is blotted out the sun. Wildfires rage all around you. The world is ending. But you're prepared. Out of your bag, you pull ash and put it underneath your eyes so you can see in a place without sight. An axe blessed by a priest so you can harm that which is there. You put up a white hood so that none would see your identity. And most importantly, 2 gold coins to pay your way for the ferryman. Looking over to that edge as you look down into the gates of purgatory below and you hear the wails of souls, you lean over and feel that vertigo edge and ask yourself, are you sure you want to hell dive? And you start your fall.